Hi everyone, I hope all of you are doing well. Today I thought I will talk to you about the story of my first research manuscript rejection. I started my PhD in August 2017 and as some of you might be aware, I started my PhD after my B.Tech, in the sense that I did not do a master's degree. I was working two jobs, and then after around 5 years after my graduation, I started my PhD. So, but it was not an integrated PhD per se. It was a direct PhD degree. But later on, I came to know that if I complete certain number of courses, I will get a master's degree as well, MTech research. So when I finally graduated, I actually got two degrees from IISc, MTech research and the PhD degree. That's for another video. The point is that I had to do a lot of coursework in the first year, actually first year and one more semester, and but still, as is with any PhD program, you need to dive into your research journey as well soon. So my research problem was on developing electrothermomechanical phenotyping or characterization tool for analyzing breast tissues. And for this, we initially we started off by looking at the engineering aspects of it, but very soon we found a very great collaborator from Assam Medical College, and we started doing the work. But then when we were looking about research communication, we built the system, we characterized it, we had some mice models to characterize it. We did communicate that aspect of the mice model testing for a conference. But then after a point, we took several data to see how the system is taking the measurements. So when we were looking at how to communicate, it was giving good results. So we were looking at how to communicate the research, and my supervisor was very particular that you need to be very sure of what the results are, and you need to be very sure about how the system is built and the details of it. And so that's when you get to learn about due diligence and being thorough in your research. So I was also involved in a lot of other lab projects. So in that process, we were also thinking about how to communicate the work. So we decided that the engineering aspects of the work, basically the microtechnology, the sensor design, the sensor characterization, the system design, the electronics aspects of it is big enough to go as a dedicated manuscript. And that the insights that I get from the electrical, thermal, mechanical characterization of the system can go as a separate research communication, because there would be eventually a lot of things to discuss. But that was much far in the future. We were just planning things out. So I was working on trying to develop the system, characterize it, testing it with some tissue samples, analyzing the data, and was not really thinking about really communicating the work even 2 years down the line, 2019. So system was ready. So the point was that I had a working system ready for electrical and thermal characterization. I eventually did mechanical characterization by integrating a force sensor that one of my lab mate had developed. I integrated it onto my system, and then I did the electrothermomechanical characterization later on. So while I was doing this electrical and thermal characterization in the lab, there was a postdoc who joined in the lab, who has since become a very close friend of mine, Dr. Tushar. And we used to have very nice scientific discussions. My point in making this video is to also let you know that how casual conversations can lead to very interesting scientific results and insights. So we used to have regular tea conversations, actually, very nice ginger chai, talk over ginger chai at both our houses as well as in canteens, Prakriti, Sarvam, etc. in IISc. So he used to tell about how his research work was. It was combining a lot of concepts in physics and electrical engineering, how cracks in a 2D film can affect the electrical conductivity, etc. So we were discussing different concepts, and we were also discussing the synergy of biology and engineering, and how concepts in engineering can help and explain things in biology, and vice versa, how systems in biology can actually be adapted to make much more well-informed engineering systems. So that's when we used to also discuss some interesting papers that we come across. So during that time, which was around the beginning of 2019, so 2017 August I joined, and this is another thing, I did not communicate my first manuscript. I did not have a paper until the end of 2021. So that's almost like 3.5 years. Yeah, 3.5 years. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, actually 4.5 years. So until 4.5 years, I did not have one research manuscript from my Ph.D. work. I did have some review articles and some co-authored publications from other lab mates. So because there is also this discussion about you should have a lot of papers published and all those things. These are all two different ways of looking at how to do research in India as well as outside the world. So coming back, so we used to have these discussions, and then there was a very nice paper that came out in Nature Physics, I think towards the end of 2018, which talked about scaling laws rule explosive growth in tumor. So the paper was describing how scaling laws that are seen in biology, basically that means that with one parameter scaling as a function of like an a raised to b scaling, c raised to d scaling, not necessarily an exponential scaling, but some value raised to some other value, a raised to b. So there are a lot of scaling laws being followed in biology, and that people have already studied, like the growth of zebrafish, growth of other animals, all follow scaling laws. But people had not applied these scaling laws to the growth of tumor cells to form solid tumor masses. So it is a very insightful paper. It came out in Nature Physics. So we were discussing that, and since I was working on breast cancer, I was telling him that okay, yeah, as you are aware, I'm doing electrical measurements and I'm doing thermal measurements. I'm also doing electrical measurements as a function of tissue temperature, etc. So he was also, we were thinking that if these scaling laws are applied to the individual cells when they become a mass, then there might be some relation of these laws to the electrical measurements also. We were very intrigued. The spark of this idea came from Tushar. Then what we decided is, okay, let's give it a try. Let's try taking measurements and see if the scaling laws are indeed, at least to see if the scaling laws are being followed for our measurements. So then we did electrical impedance measurements as a function of frequency, as well as thermal measurements in the sense that electrical conductivity values as a function of tissue temperature. I'm not getting into the technical details of it. But we then fit it to some scaling law equations, and surprisingly we observed that this data was following scaling laws, and the rate of scaling, if we can say, or the exponential or the power term, or you can call it as power laws as well, the power terms were actually very different between tumors and healthy tissue. So that means that tumors were scaling much more rapidly than healthy tissue with regard to the electrical properties, and this is kind of very related to that paper that we saw in Nature Physics. We were very, very excited. Me being as naive as I was, without a published paper, I was thinking that this is a big scientific discovery. It's very nice, so I can communicate to a very big journal, etc. So until then, I had not really written anything out of my research work. Yes, I did indeed prepare some proposals as well as some reports for my annual reviews, but not a full-fledged paper. So we presented these results to my supervisor, and then he was also supportive that okay, you can write it up as a manuscript. So the interesting thing is that my other manuscript, which is describing the main system, was still in the works. It was still being developed and written up. Then since this was a very exciting endeavor, we thought okay, let's write this up. We wanted to write it up also as a way of channelizing our thoughts, structuring our thoughts more than communicating it. So we started writing it together, and we used the system, did some measurements, and then wrote up a paper. We thought it is as anybody would do with any other creation or creative. Science is also a creative endeavor. You need to have creative thoughts in your mind to apply these scientific concepts to find answers. So we were like, okay, this is nice. So we wrote up a paper, and we even gave a very fancy title, Observation of Scaling Laws in Electrical Measurements from Breast Tissues. We were on cloud 9. We were like so proud of our work. We submitted it. I think the first submission was to applied physics letters. APL, people in the field know it's a very, even though the impact factor is less, impact factor is a different thing. It's a very, very renowned journal. And then they were very prompt. In 7 days, I got an editorial rejection, desk rejection. That means that it did not even get reviewed. The editor looked at the manuscript and figured out that it was not fit for the journal. The topic of the work was not fit for the journal. So then I was like, okay, at that point, it's all about the psychology of you and how you mature as a researcher, I would say. I was actually very upset. I thought, okay, maybe it's not greater work. Then I was like, since I was a first I was making these first decisions, then getting it reviewed by my supervisor. Then I was like, okay, at least I want to communicate this work. So I thought, okay, let me go for some journal. So I selected a journal called Medical Engineering and Physics. It did not have much of an impact factor. It was actually a Q2 journal at that time. There are quartiles in journals. My supervisor was also not very happy with the choice of the journal. But then kind of I was, maybe you can say, adamant. I was like, okay, I want to communicate this. It's an important finding. I don't mind what journal it is, but it needs to be out in the world. So then he's like, okay, fine. He was very supportive. Okay, you communicate it. So by then it had become, I think, December of 2021. Or no, it had become December of 2019. When we started 2018, the Nature Physics paper came out. We discussed, we did all the work. It took almost a year. That's the point. So 2017, I started the PhD. 18, 19, I think 18, end of 18, that Nature Physics paper came out. We started discussing 2019 and 2020, the COVID happened, so experiments were very significantly delayed. Somehow we did the experiments. I was on campus. For some months I went back home because campus closed. And by December 2020, I submitted it to this journal called Medical Engineering and Physics. After all the desk process, it was showing under review. It was showing under review for January, it was under review. February, it was under review. March, it was under review. There was no response. January went, February, March, April. So then I told my guide we should check. So he sent an email asking what is the status. So after, I think, almost 2 weeks after sending the email, we got an email back in May of 2021 that the journal was trying hard to get it reviewed. They sent emails to, I think, more than 20 people, and only one person agreed to review the manuscript. And based on that one person's review, he or she was not in support of the work. They had some comments to give. Basically that we also added how these laws were being followed for each of the samples we measured, and also as a summary results of overall how is the fit and how is it different between tumor and normal. And he had issues that some of these fits were not that good, and that he wanted to have results from more samples. Our idea was to communicate this concept using the concept that these laws are being followed, first observation of it, and the use of a system to do this. But then our focus was all, like I mentioned, on observation of scaling laws. So when you make such broad, big claims that I am observing scaling laws in electrical transport in breast tissues, indeed, like the reviewer mentioned, maybe you should have more data. We did not have data from that many samples, but still we wanted to communicate the idea. So yes, so we took the review, tried to take it positively. I was very upset. I was devastated because I was waiting for 5 months about what happens to this, and that my mind also went into limbo, and I was like, I wanted to know what happens. My ego was also waiting to see how these people saw my work and all those things. These are all thoughts that people will have while doing PhD or any work for that matter. So then we took a step back. I had meetings with both my co-authors, mainly Tushar, and with my supervisor. And then he told that we need to be realistic. We know that these results are good, but we need to put that work in the right context. You are not a physicist. You are an engineer who is trying to make a system in biology, and the idea is that you are able to use these laws, and using the power factors that you get, you are able to differentiate, and that's what you are looking at. Your focus is on application side. So why not restructure the work as an innovative application of the system that you have developed, while focusing on the results that you got, not really talking about the system. So by then, with 5 months had already crossed, right? Almost a year had crossed by the time since I finished taking the data for this work. Still, I was trying to get this manuscript communicated. I had already written up quite a bit of my main manuscript, which is for the system, describing the system. So I could not put description of system in this manuscript. So I briefly described what the system is, not going into the details of it, and looking at what sensors are there and what measurements can be done, and primarily focused on, still in the content I told that scaling laws are there, we were able to observe scaling laws and showed the results, but then we changed the focus of the manuscript, and so that this is a way of characterizing, bimodal characterization, temperature and frequency based characterization of breast tissues that can be potentially used for cancer diagnosis. So we basically made it, we understood that we need to be modest with our communications, understand the limitations of our work. That is my first appreciation of the fact that you need to be very aware about both the plus points of your work as well as the negative marks of your work. And that does not mean, if there are a lot of negative marks, negative points in your work, but if it is still done in a very thorough manner, it does not mean that it doesn't merit publication. That's the main point. You just need to restructure it in a way that you can communicate what is the core idea of what you want to communicate, and not claim too many things which are not really claimed. So I restructured it, made it a much more modest manuscript, and submitted it to IEEE censors with a focus on the application side of it. So it got reviewed, and finally in December 2021 it got published. So 2018-2019 time we got this idea. 2019 from mid of 2019 to the whole of 2020 we took the data, we wrote up the manuscript, it went into review to two, three journals, got several rejections, learnt lessons the hard way, and then finally in December 2021 it got communicated. So that was the first time, but my research work was out in the world. That's almost 18, 19, 20, 21 August and 21 December. After 4.5 years, that's a time that some people take to finish their PhD, but this is when my first manuscript came out as a paper. That's when my manuscript became a paper. But still, it was not my main paper. And then eventually, I submitted my main engineering paper. And then after I graduated, my third paper, I collected all the data, analyzed everything. And my third paper only got communicated very recently, 6 months back, 2023. That's like 6 years after I started my PhD. I was being reflective of, I see a lot of people posting things and about PhD and everything. I was being reflective of my own journey. So I wanted to tell the several aspects of it. This is one aspect of it, of my first rejection of my first research manuscript and the story of it. So finally I communicated it in December 2021. I hope this was useful to some of you, and see you next time. Bye bye.